realized that I had to stop focusing on the outside because I had tried everything else. I tried to succeed in every other way in life, and I'd achieved every goal. I was in that place where if I didn't quiet mind, nothing was worth it. Like, the universe has a way of pushing us to grow, and if we don't listen, we're going to end up getting sick. The voices get louder. Our body starts shutting down. Conscious mind is operating all this stuff for us, and it gets to the point where it's running 85% of our days. But its primary purpose that causes us so much pain is it's trying to protect us.
Welcome back to another podcast. We've got a great guest, Michael Wood, CEO of Jarrett Companies, and now helping people to learning to love being you. So, Mike, on the last podcast that we had, you talked about the anxiety and depression you lived with, but I want to go deeper. What did you actually feel like in your body every single day? Where did you carry it? And, what was the physical experience of, what was your physical experience of living that way?
It was miserable. It was like a quiet shame I carried around with me every day. It feels like, you're constantly bracing for a problem. You're constantly worried somebody's going to figure out that you're not worthy of doing the job that you're doing, or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. You're a complete failure every day, and you're just doing your best to put on a mask, smile, act like the tough guy, act like the confident guy, and inside it's all a lie. It's pretty miserable, to be honest.
Yeah. So naturally, when someone is feeling like they aren't worthy, from what it sounds like, they are resisting being fully seen. Did you have a moment where there was there a moment where life forced you to be fully seen for who you are, or was that something that you kind of decided to bring forth, or how did that? Because when you say mask, naturally, I know that which you resist persists, and if you're resisting being fully seen, and you're constantly telling the universe, you're like, oh, I'm not worthy, and you're like, grunging for what's to come. Was there a point where there was something that came that made you have to kind of confront all this, or was that something that you just, had preemptively decided to do? I'm curious.
So I think what happened for me, and I think everybody's kind of got their wake up moment, but it was after about a 6-month period here at Jarrett, because we grew really fast, and we realized one of these jobs we had a $16 million construction job in Murfreesboro. And about halfway through it, there was a point where we realized that we had been assuming 10% profits on this thing on top of the cost, and the job wasn't going to make any money. If anything, it was going to lose money. And so we found ourselves in about $1 million hole in February, and it was scary. We realized that we had incompetent people, that we had grown too fast, and we had to downsize. I had to go to Murfreesboro myself and pretty much project manage this job. It was a terrifying moment, and the whole time through that process, as I was trying to solve this problem and that problem, the noise in my head was just getting louder. Mike, you realize this was your fault. You realize you shouldn't have been this job. You realize that, all these things were your fault. And as I went through and I made so many changes, we completely revamped the entire company in about a 6-month process. We downgraded from 20 crews down to about 10, getting rid of anybody who wasn't competent. We slowed down our workload, rearranged how we do things in the office, because we were losing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on contracts because we weren't reading them properly. We were just signing them, and we would realize that the wrong contract was attached to this contract, and it had way more scope in it than it had. So ultimately what happened was 6 months of 90 hours a week and just solving every problem, and then all of a sudden the noise stopped and there wasn't anything else to fix. And that noise that had been carrying on, that I'd been trying to pushed down as I worked through all these problems, and it just got loud. It got so loud, Evan, I couldn't breathe. Like the noise just stayed loud, and um, it was miserable. I remember the first time that I let any of it out and actually said anything to anyone was to my boss at that point. You know, we basically climbing out of the hole there, and it was towards the end of that year. I mean, it looked like we were going to be able to break even on our site division and make some money on the other divisions. And so ultimately it was a win from where we started. Plus we were in a position now where we could succeed in the future. So ultimately what we went through, because I can't go on this way
Mm.
anymore. And so that's when I realized that I had to stop focusing on the outside because I had tried everything else. I tried to succeed in every other way in life and I'd achieved every goal, you know, the house, the money, the woman, the kids are healthy, the family's healthy. It's all good, and I'm still miserable on the inside. So I turned my focus inward, and that's when it all changed. But that moment that you're asking about, it's when everything else got quiet and the noise just got louder.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering, the thought comes into my head. It's so difficult, especially since you have all that stuff. And humans are they're more afraid of loss than they are of gaining something, or, they're afraid of loss. So they're like, for you, you had the family, you had the money, you had the success. How did it scare you of what would be on the other side of quieting the
Oh
mind,
yeah.
thinking that, oh wait, this might because obviously this loud mind could be attributed to your success. And I'm sure at the time that that loud mind and making you feel unworthy and needing to prove that you are worthy, needing to prove that you're the man, having all this external success was difficult to go through the transformation of trying to quiet the mind, if that means you might lose what you work so hard to get. Does that make sense? Was there a point where you were afraid of that, and like how did you get over that? Or were you just like, man, if I don't if I don't get over this quiet mind, like none of this stuff is worth it? Where was your head at, and how'd you get through that?
So I was in that place where if I didn't quiet the mind, nothing was
Mm.
worth it. Like it was so bad, it was so loud where nothing was worth it. But how I got through it, you know, you're right. I couldn't have if it would have all failed, and I worried at times that it would. If it would have all failed, I wouldn't have been able to replace my salary just like that, right? You know, there's going home to your wife and saying, "Hey, we have to change the way we live, and you got to go back to work." You know, that's a shitty
Mhm.
day. So yes, there was that fear, but on top of that, there was just negative core beliefs from my childhood that ultimately I figured out, you know, 5 or 6 years later that, you know, where all that stuff was coming from, and you know, that's the inception of the program and all. But um, you know, there's a lot of aspects to what was happening, and I think if the universe has a way of pushing us to grow, and if we don't listen, we're going to end up getting sick. The voices get louder. You know, our body starts shutting down. The universe and our body will tell us, give us all the hints, but when we don't listen, it finds a way to get
Did
louder.
you get sick at that point, or what was your body telling you at that time?
No, I didn't get sick. I didn't physically get sick, but I did. You know, mentally I
Yeah.
was. You know, I couldn't exist. Everything was miserable. Every moment was miserable, unless I numbed myself with
Yeah.
alcohol.
Understood. What I'm wondering, and this is what a lot of people don't, this is what most people don't talk about, is when you are feeling that miserable for such a long period of time, the anxiousness, depression, the loudness in the head, right? When you're running on that for years, what does that do to the people around you? That, like, what was happening in relationships that you couldn't see at that time?
You know, the thing that I've kind of realized. is most everybody we come in contact is living some form of this. And so you kind of pair up with somebody like frequency wise that is aligned with that. Like, so if I'm running on that level of anxiety and depression, I'm typically not going to find somebody who's super healthy and not running. Like, those things don't align. So I think for as far as relationships, I held a tone that was consistent with all of my relationships. Everybody else was,
Mm.
struggling in the same way, and it's actually a very challenging part of healing and growing, is because you start to see the pain in everyone else as you're starting to heal, and it's challenging.
Mm. And how did you approach that after you have healed? How did you approach healing others?
It's tough. The first thing you do is you shout at the rooftops, look, I got the secret to success. Drink out of this cup and you're going to be healed. You're just trying to share it with everybody, but it doesn't work that way. Nobody wants to drink out of your cup. You're stupid. Like, go away. That's a stupid cup. Like, nobody believes you. Nobody wants to listen. You're the crazy old man with the crazy old stories.
Mm.
But occasionally, randomly, somebody will approach you and be like, hey, man, I'm down and out, and I see that you're feeling better. And what'd you do? All right, now that's a door that's opened up, and now you can actually help them. When we learn from all of our experiences, it's something now we can teach to the next person. And that's what we should do. And we all have a longing for that. But the first thing everybody wants to do
Yeah.
is help everybody around them, because you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Talking about a curse, there was something you mentioned on the last pod that you said, you said the subconscious mind has no concept of time, and that
Mm-hmm.
there was something that happened when you were, say, 5 years old that is still happening today. Can you explain? Because,
Yeah.
like, I think the normal listener would hear that and say, well, I can't even remember when I was 5. Can you explain why that is actually good news for someone who's listening?
So, let's run down a few, and you don't have to think about walking ever again. So the subconscious mind is operating all this stuff for us, and it gets to the point where it's running 85% of our days. And it has lots of different purposes, but its primary purpose that causes us so much pain is it's trying to protect us. So the subconscious mind is literally going to hold on to a memory when you were 5 years old, when you got into an elevated emotional state and plugged in a clear intention. And that clear intention is that for me, when I was 5 years old, I didn't know how to read like the rest of the kids. So when I was trying to learn how to spell my name, the first time I realized that I was different than the other kids, my teacher got frustrated because I couldn't spell Michael. And she was trying to get me to do it. I couldn't do it. I could see her frustration, and she's like, well, just spell Mike. And so I started writing Mike, and it was much easier, and I was able to spell Mike. And in that moment, when she got elevated, I started noticing that I couldn't read like the rest of the kids and write my name like the rest of the kids. And it was the first time that I realized that I was different. And in that emotional state, I felt stupid. I was less than the rest of the kids, and that was a program. So from that moment on, I constantly felt that way. Well, the subconscious mind's job is to remind you of that, to constantly scan your environment to make sure that you never feel that way again. It's going to constantly try to protect you to make sure that that never happens again. Well, in doing so, it's constantly reminding you that you felt stupid. So you constantly have that reminder that you feel stupid, and it just lives with you until you get to that with our imagination and relive it and reframe it with love and compassion and forgiveness. I could forgive that teacher. I could forgive the kids who were snickering, and I could forgive myself for not learning to read like everybody else, because I got a rare form of dyslexia that went undiagnosed all the way into adulthood. So I could reframe that thing to where it's not a scary moment. It's now it's filled with love, compassion, and forgiveness with everybody involved in that moment. In the subconscious mind, it's not. There's nothing to protect there, nothing to see here. Everybody's Everybody's happy, everybody's loving, and now the subconscious mind goes, that's not anything we got to hold on to, and it lets it go.
Mm.
And it's extremely powerful when we do this because now all of a sudden we become free from these things that have been haunting us from our childhood.
So what times in my life where I've been at an elevated emotional state and that there's no short occurrence of that happening when I was younger. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if like you can't remember, like you can remember the feeling very well because I think the feeling is very familiar. But what if you
yeah.
can't find the origin story where the belief was written? How do you kind of like work your way back and get there?
For men. For women, they just go back to the moments and they find them very quickly, like, oh, yeah, I remember this, I remember that. Women are more in tune with their emotions and they kind of hold on to them. I had one young guy that came to me and his anxiety and depression through the roof. And the earliest memory that he could think of was 19 years old.
Wow.
Like he couldn't think of anything. And I know I've known this kid his whole life. It is there is hundreds of things that happened to him that created negative core beliefs that's causing his thing. But what happens is the system is trying to protect you. So the subconscious mind's way of protecting him, and a lot of men, is to just put up a wall so you never have to experience it. You never have to see it. You forget that memory. It like puts it in a vault and you can't remember it. But what happens is go to that 19-year-old memory and fix that one, and then guess what happens? Some more bubble up. You got like 2 or 3 more from when you were 16 or 15, and then you deal with those, and then it starts whittling down, and you'll eventually get back to them, and that's usually how it works. You have to work with the subconscious mind, right? It is your protector. You can't treat it like it's your enemy. Like, why are you doing this to me? You have to treat it with compassion and love, and allow it to heal in the way that it's allowing you to access it.
So I'm wondering, I'm going to use my example because as you're talking, I actually do remember my very first memory. My very
Yeah,
first memory was actually a dream. I woke up from a nightmare, and that nightmare, and I was 4 years old, and I'm running away from the cops. The cops are I'm like
yeah,
hiding in my yard at my house, and then I wake up from this dream and I go up to my mom and I say, so that's an elevated emotional state, obviously.
yep.
And I go up to my mom and I say, are the cops gone? She's like, what? I'm like, are the cops gone? They were outside looking for me. She's like, honey, I think you were dreaming. So I'm wondering what you notice about that specifically.
So, like for me, the first thing that I would say is, try to relate to that 4-year-old little boy. One, it's going to create confusion. So you got to be careful about what that makes you feel, because when your mom said that, now you're kind of feeling a little bit like, man, am I crazy? Am I not smart? Something along those lines. And then the other thing is, you know, why were you running from the cops? I need to be careful. I don't like running from the cops. So you can have multiple things in there. Like, I have to be good, right? So now you can create a core belief that says you have to be good. So you're always constantly looking, trying to be the good boy, trying to live the right way. And, I don't know if either one of those hits, but, you start throwing darts out there and you go, wait a minute. That was how I felt. Oh, wait a minute. That's why I'm living my life in a certain way. I've never been in trouble, and I never get anywhere near messing with the line. When I drink, I call an Uber. When guys are doing something stupid, I get the heck out of there. Like, well, that could be a response to that core belief that got created there.
That's so funny, man, because I was so straight edge growing up. I never did alcohol, no drugs, no nothing. And my parents could give a crap less. They were, my dad was an alcoholic and my mom was a stoner. And in high school, I used to throw parties at their house and they'd go camping and they'd know there were parties at the house. They just did not care. They knew kids were there. So they
Yeah.
were literally the most chill parents in the world. And here I am as a kid who is the most straight edge kid in the world. I mean, to the extent where I figured out that, and my favorite things in the world was chocolate chip cookies and Oreos. And my parents were like, there's caffeine in that, right? Which is not actually true. But I literally stopped eating my favorite thing in the world because I thought there was a drug in it. So it's kind of funny you say the good boy thing, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering, the phrase you use, elevated state, what happens in that state that makes that the subconscious mind so programmable? Like, how does that mechanism work in reverse to heal, I guess? So it's kind of two questions there, but
Yeah, so it's both. You have to get into that elevated emotional state to program it, but you also have to get into an elevated emotional state to reprogram it. So the way that it works, and we can get into the mysticism of it if we want to here, because at the end of the day, the science is not really going to help us here. All we know is that it works. Buddhists have been doing this for 2,500 years. But the reality for me, what I think is a knowing for me, and some scientists may tell me I'm crazy, but the reality is that when we're all connected, right? Science is actually starting to connect some of these dots, that we are all connected at some level. And when we get into an elevated emotional state, it unlocks a higher state of connectedness. And so when we're calm, you can't really get into there. Nothing's getting in. But when you get into that elevated emotional state, you can connect with other people and yourself in ways that are pretty amazing. I've taken this sales course, and they talk about when you just sell something, you got to get excited, right? You got to get that emotional going, because science says that they're these mirror reflectors. And when you get excited and you connect with somebody, then all of a sudden that they mirror that same emotion back to you, and then you can connect with them and make a sale. I think it's true, but the mirrored receptors, I think, is bullshit. I think we're all connected. We're all one. And when you open up and you get into those elevated emotional states, you're actually connecting with that other person on a way that science can't understand, other than to call it mirrored reflectors. And now all of a sudden you're able to interact with people on a higher level. And I think that's exactly what's happening with the subconscious mind. When you get yourself open and in an elevated state, it opens you up. And as a spiritual being, as an energetic being, it opens you up and allows that subconscious mind to program.
Understood. So when you get yourself into an elevated emotional state, it opens up the subconscious, where if things are quiet, the subconscious is just
dormant. Yeah, it's doing its job. Yeah, it's just trying to keep you safe. It's not in a programmable state. But you can. It's hard, right? So there's two different ways to program the subconscious mind that I actually help people and try to teach people. And the first one is what we're talking about here. The second one is autosuggestion. It's how we learned how to walk. It's how we learned how to drive. It's through repetition, right? So one of the things I do in one of the weeks of my program is I'll have everybody come up with their thing, right? For me, I was stupid. For a lot of young women, it's their looks. And I'll have them put whatever that is on a sticky note in their car, put it on their screensaver of their phone, put it in the mirror in the bathroom when they wake up, and just say it out loud, right? So if you wake up and look in the mirror every day and you say, I am beautiful, when you say that the first 3 weeks, it feels gross. It feels like a lie. But after about a month or two, you look in the mirror and you go, I look good today. And you're like, damn right I do. Like, it starts to feel good, right? You start to feel good because it's auto-suggestion. You've said it so many times that the subconscious mind starts to believe it. And it's pretty amazing. So there's more than one way to program the subconscious mind. And the auto-suggestion is just a longer, tougher road. And you're not really going back and reprogramming anything that way. You can't tell yourself, if I told myself, my story, I couldn't read and write until I was about 25 years old. So I had a plethora of old negative core beliefs that said I was stupid. I could never rewrite all of those by saying I am smart every day. From now until the end of time, I would just have two conflicting beliefs.
Yeah.
I would say it sometimes and be like, yeah, I feel that way. But then I would still in my body have those emotions flare up, because those moments that happened in the present moment, they're still happening right now. And no matter how much I change that with autosuggestion, it doesn't fix that problem.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. That makes sense. There's something that stuck out to me earlier when you were talking about actually going back, say it was an example of the teacher and forgiving the teacher and forgiving yourself
Yeah.
and I think that, and I'm speaking from experience when I've talked to people about forgiveness, most people hear forgiveness and they think, you're letting someone off the hook. So what
Yep.
do you mean when you actually say forgiveness, and why is it so critical to this process? And like, if you could help someone like really understand what forgiveness really is, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. And I say that, but from a higher level, I could contradict that. So I said earlier, we're all connected. So if we are all connected and I'm forgiving them, well, I'm forgiving me at the same time, right? So any resentment that you're carrying, resentment or anger that you're carrying around, is literally just burning up your insides on a daily basis. That old phrase, anger is the poison we drink and hope that our enemies die from. It's not going to work. If you free yourself from the pain that they caused you by forgiving them, like, isn't that an amazing thing? But it doesn't let them off the hook, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't uh, maintain safe boundaries. If somebody used to treat you poorly, forgive them so the memories of them will stop haunting you. The pain they caused you, you can be free from it, but don't let them back into your life. All right, keep that boundary there. Freeing, freeing somebody by freeing yourself by forgiving somebody has nothing to do with allowing them to continue to hurt you.
Mm-mm.
You're not exonerating their crime. If they deserve to go to jail for what they did to you, you're not going to go forgive them and then go stand at the courthouse and say, yeah, let them out. No, like, their path is their path. Let their path be their path, but don't allow them to hurt you anymore. Right? That's the purpose of forgiving somebody, is to stop hurting anymore, because you know people get, very serious things happen to them, right? Like, physical violence, abuse, rape, just horrible things that people do to other people. And it happens in a moment, and it's terrible. And, week, months, they can maybe get their life back together after something terrible like that, but they never truly heal from it. And some will find peace when they are able to actually forgive the person that did that
Mm.
terrible thing to them. And really only then, because until they do, all of that rage and all that anger is, they're just carrying it around with them, and it's causing them pain by experiencing that rage and anger all day, every day.
Is it possible for someone to heal without forgiveness? No.
No, unfortunately, it's not. Not if somebody's done something to you. Now, like, yeah, even in the rewriting process, like, we go through the rewriting process, and I try to teach people how to forgive themselves and others before we ever get to the rewriting process, because it doesn't work. You can go through the whole thing, get yourself an elevated emotion, try to reframe the whole thing with compassion, but if you're still holding resentment, the subconscious mind says, well, I still need to protect you from this. The subconscious mind is saying, okay, well, this is still in the fear bucket. I'm going to still hold on to this memory. This is not, I can't let it
Mm.
go. But as soon as you forgive, it goes, this gets to be light. And there's nothing for it to protect you from. When you use compassion, love, and forgiveness, the subconscious mind doesn't have to protect you from it anymore. Right? We got to all keep in mind that the subconscious mind's number one job is to keep you safe. And that's what it's trying to do. So that's why it's holding on to these memories in the first place. It doesn't hold on to memories of love and, I had this amazing day. Like, yes, those things are confidence builders, and there's a level of it that sticks with you that says, I could do this and I could do that, but not at the level at which, I feel stupid because I can't read at the same level as other people, and I'm unworthy, unlovable. The four major ones: I'm unworthy, unlovable, stupid, and ugly. And it's hard to do enough in the world to build enough confidence to overshadow any of that.
Yeah. There's this thought that came up for me as I was listening to you, and I'm referring back to, there was this part that you mentioned about your dyslexia, and because I think this goes into forgiveness, by the way, and you were talking about how you need to forgive the teacher, you need to forgive the doctor. It was a little known form of dyslexia that was difficult to diagnose, and there's this subtle, I just noticed this subtle hint of innocence because they didn't know, innocence because of ignorance. And I'm wondering if that resonates with you, and if, because I think that's also like the biggest missing part in forgiveness, is that people aren't willing to see the innocence in someone else, that they weren't trying to do bad to them in reality, they didn't know. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
So during the process, I teach people two phrases that will forgive everybody of everything. I stole one from Jesus, and people in pain cause pain. And then what did Jesus say when he was on the cross? I forgive you, for you know not what you've done. Most people have no idea what they're doing when they're causing pain. It was something they learned. 95% of all the people who abuse other people were abused. Like, it's a taught thing. Like, so they don't even know what they're doing. They're on autopilot hurting somebody else because that's how they were loved when they were a kid. And so those phrases, it makes it very easy to kind of change the perspective, shift it off of you and shift it onto, wow, this person who did this horrible thing must have had the same horrible thing done to them. This is terrible. Like, I can't even imagine to have the kind of abuse done to them that would make them think that this is the way life is supposed to be, that you would do this to somebody else. And, it's terrible, and it's not forgiving anybody that's doing something terrible like that. As far as the world is concerned and laws, right and wrong, we all know that's wrong. We can't forgive it. Yeah, go to jail, suffer the consequences of your actions. But if we don't forgive ourselves and the other person, the pain that was experienced in that moment will last forever. And that's a shame when it doesn't have to.
And then once you can forgive, once you can see that, like you said, forgive them for they know not what they do, and what was the phrase you said? Pain causes others pain. Painful people hurt painful, or cause painful.
People in pain cause
People in
pain.
pain cause
Yeah.
pain. All that stuff leads back to judgment, which causes a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety. And when you're talking about this mask that you had over yourself and like trying to put something forward that you weren't, all that stuff stems from judgment. So it kind of comes
Yeah.
full circle. How did that kind of, the forgiveness, the going back into the trauma, seeing the ignorance, seeing that there's innocence in these people, how did that start to change your your overall daily life? Because judgment plays a part in all those things, and it seems like when those principles are used with the subconscious, you're able to not judge every thought you have, and not, you understand what I'm saying. It's like it comes full circle
Yeah.
and you start to experience something different. I'm curious what you felt.
So you're bringing me to a full circle moment. So, I grew up in a house that, my dad left when I was 1.5. My mom raised three unruly boys, and I was probably the most unruly of them. Sorry, Mom. And at the end of the day, um, my mom was struggling. You know what I mean? She was terrified. She was very young, 20s, with three kids and nobody to help. She did her best to find a job, put us all in daycare. Um, and she just did the best that she could, but she didn't have a lot left. And this sounds terrible to say, but like, we didn't make a connection. So I grew up, in a house where I could come and go as I pleased at a very early age. At 10 years old, I could be miles away from the house at midnight, and nobody really knew. That's back in the days when they had to put commercials on the TV to remind their the parents that they had kids somewhere. Like, hey, where are your kids at right now at 10 o'clock? Like, but it was relatively normal, and I'm grateful for all these experiences. But what I realized later in life, and even as I'm going through this program, learn to love being you, and I had a hard time understanding what it truly meant to love myself, right? And what I realized through the process of forgiving, the more I forgave everybody around me. Guy cuts me off in traffic, I forgive you. I hope you get home safe. I hope your family's good. I know whatever's going on in your world's, difficult. Every instant for everything, I forgive everyone at all times. It becomes a practice. The more I forgive everyone else, the more I'm able to forgive me. Because that's what's really happening in all of our brains. We're being super critical and judgmental, like you just said, about ourselves. And when we're being judgmental about ourselves and we don't forgive anybody else out in the world, well, we're not going to forgive ourselves either. But when we've just spent the last 6 months forgiving everyone for everything, by God, what about me? I get some forgiveness too. Like, I can take it easy on me. It shouldn't be that way. So that came full circle for me with just the whole learning to love myself. I actually started to feel true compassion and love towards myself through forgiveness of others. It just kind of, after a while, you can't be that judgmental of yourself if you're forgiving everyone else.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Life is like a mirror, and yeah,
Yeah.
what you're experiencing is due to your own reflection, due to what you're putting out. So it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I wanna touch on a different basis on the breathwork side of things, because you've done breathwork in maximum security prisons, which is very, very intriguing to me. And I'm wondering, what do people tell you, like what happens in their bodies that they tell you they report feeling essentially from doing this stuff? Like, what happens in the body when you teach this?
It's amazing. I talked to one guy who'd been in there for 14 years, and uh, he had been listening to all that everybody come by his door and talk to him and try to coach him, and we kind of connected there. And I was like, man, I'm not here to talk about religion. I'm here to talk about what's going on inside of you and maybe give you some tools to help quiet the noise down. And he kind of looked at me weird, and he's like, so what you got? Like, give me something. And so we went through the box breathing, and we went through gratitude. And because it was simple, I didn't have a whole lot of time with him. And I go back 2 weeks later, and he's like, dude, like, everything's different. Like, good things are happening to me in here just because, like, I'm projecting good things into my mind. Like, things are happening even in prison that are showing me that things can be better. And it's almost like I'm creating these good things by just having these positive thoughts. So he's got his hands out, right? He's ready for more. And I was like, all right, well, let's take it to the next level. And I taught him a breath work, pranayama, and you basically flood your body with oxygen, right? So you breathe into your belly, you breathe into your chest, and then out through your mouth, and you do it all really fast. And it gets kind of scary because after like the first 5 minutes, your body starts to go, quit, stop. All your anxiety starts to bubble up, and it's kind of scary.
Mm.
But then after about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on if you've done it before, the anxiety will flare up, and then it'll just poof, be gone. And it's like you can't have, as long as you continue to breathe like this, you can't have a fearful thought. And your body starts to buzz with energy, and you got to set a timer. You can only go 30 minutes, especially for the first time, because if you go too long, your body will almost start to get physically sick. Over time, you can do it for hours, and I do it for hours sometimes still. I do that quite a bit because it's fun. But I explain this to him, and I go back and see him, and he's just like, he's in another world. He's like, man, what did you do to me? How'd you teach me this? Like, he was giving me a hard time, but ultimately he was extremely grateful because it was the first time he was able to experience moments without fear, without drugs or alcohol.
Mm.
Like in his entire recollection of his life, he was able to create a moment where fear didn't enter into his thoughts, and he had blissful, happy thoughts that fear didn't wasn't invasive. He wasn't talking about how bad he was, and he wasn't fighting all the demons. And he was just extremely grateful for it. And with somebody sitting in prison, that's a extremely powerful thing. You're left with nothing but time, which can be a gift, right? What's his name? The apartheid leader. He spent 27 years in prison, and after he got out, he basically reported back on his life years later and said that his time in prison was the most peaceful and calm moments of his life because the noise on the outside was too distracting. He couldn't go back to those peaceful places that people can learn how to find. And being locked up in prison became a gift for him because it was quiet. He got left alone with no interruptions. And going inward, yes, it quiets the noise. Yes, you could rewrite old negative core beliefs. You could find peace, but there's something way more in there than most people realize. There's as much going on the inside as there is out here in the universe.
Mm. So for someone who's not in prison, how do they make the time to because they hear you and it sounds like one of those experiences that that you just have to experience in order to really hear the noise going on within, because all the distractions that are without are not present anymore.
Yep.
So how do you tune out that to get more present within? So then therefore probably be more peaceful.
Yeah, you have to you have to quiet your environment. You have to set boundaries. You have to make time for yourself. You that's the part that's hard. So in the first 3 weeks of my program, I teach people how to manually take control of their mind using a handful of tools, meditation and gratitude and breath work. And they do it. If you do it repeatedly for weeks on end, now all of a sudden and we add a couple more things in there. It's not just as simple as that, but you start reframing thoughts and you start getting, familiar with the witness, which is the one witnessing your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. So you combine all these things and something amazing starts happening in your mind that you become hypersensitive now to negativity. That used to be the dominant state. So you don't even realize that you can be in the opposite. So when you start producing oxytocin, you're actually drug-induced happy based off the content of your thoughts. When you shift back and forth, now you start to see the opposites, right? And you start, well, I feel bad, so I pull myself over using these manual tools. It's like a manual shift. Everybody's got these tools now, so you manually shift. Well, after 3 weeks, it only takes about 3 weeks, and you have shifted your mind and the chemicals in your brain and body dramatically. Then you start to realize how much your environment will affect you, how many friends you have that are negative, how many coworkers that are negative, how much your spouse or your loved ones are negative that are really close to you, and you have to set boundaries. The only way to move forward with all the progress that you've made is to reestablish boundaries. And I think that's my advice to answer your question is if you're going to do this work, you have to become aware of what's happening inside of you to get that polarity of understanding what it feels like to feel bad, but also what it feels like to feel good. And then start assessing your world to create the boundaries to maintain stability, because out here in the world, it's very unstable. You can get thrown into an unstable inner state of being at a moment's notice and you can't do anything about it. But you could go into your room and use all these tools and nobody's ever going to bother you, right? So it's very easy. Once you get into an inner state, nothing can take you out of it. if you're in a meditative state or you're using any of these tools or whatever, like nothing is going to pull you out of that except for maybe a loss, getting distracted, but then you pull yourself right
Mm.
back in. Man, you riding down the road, somebody cuts you off, and now you're in an upset state. You're at work, and your boss says something rude about something you should have did on time, or whatever. Now you're in a flared up state. Your spouse blames you for doing something that maybe you did or didn't do, and now you're in a flared up state. Like the outside world is constantly going to be poking, and it's very easy to trigger that old stuff that we're carrying around
Yeah,
with
you just have to find that. From what I'm hearing from you, you just have to find that space that for yourself where you can become non-reactive, almost like your own prison. Not actually, but um,
us.
understood.
Yeah, you got to protect your space.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's extremely important in the process of healing and just becoming, quieter, happier, peaceful, is to not shut yourself off from the world, but be around the people who elevate you and lift you up, not the ones that are going to pull you in. Like the Buddhists basically use this term that heaven and hell is here on earth. There's 7 levels of hell and 7 levels of heaven that we all get to live here on earth. And our job is to try to elevate ourselves while we're
mm.
here. And if you're around negative, judgmental people, I'm sorry, but you're living in the 7 lower ones right
Yeah,
now. And most of us can relate to that, right? It's very difficult when your mind is racing and you're feeling unworthy, unlovable, stupid. You're living in one of those lower 7 right
yeah,
now.
yeah, 100%. I'm wondering because there's got to be someone. This is probably my last question. There's got to be someone who is listening who is like they've experienced so much bad in these elevated emotional states, and
Mm-hmm.
and also they just have been experiencing so much of what you're talking about with depression, anxiety.
Just
Oh,
just a
you're good.
second.
I'll re-ask. It's all good. Yeah, there's got to be
All
someone
right.
who's listening to this who is feeling so much bad that they don't believe that feeling so much better is even possible. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what you would say to that person who has experienced so much negativity or these negative feelings that it's without drugs or alcohol is the only time in which they can experience those things. They're like, how can I
Mm-hmm.
have this be my default experience? Obviously you can't stop all negative experiences. With the tools that you have, you have stuff to combat it and then get back to the state in which you'd like to be in. But I'm wondering, for someone who just doesn't even believe that's possible, what would you say to them?
I'm saying I would tell them you're not broken. This is a process. I would highly recommend that they turn their focus inward and try some breath work. Try the pranayama exercise. I work with a girl who, in her words, experienced 11 years of everyday emotional or physical abuse for 11 years, and she's been on her journey for a little
Hmm.
while. And we talked about rewriting an old negative core belief, but if that happened to you every day for 11 years, it might take 11 years once you start your journey to get to the other side of that. So, depending on what happened and how long you endured, pain and suffering under, those type of circumstances, it could take a really long time for you to get to the other side. But what I would challenge you to do is to try something new. Try breath work, try meditation. Most people who are feeling that way, they have a hard time with meditation. But breath work is a little different. You're not trying to make the mind go away. You're just trying to focus on on the breath. And when you focus on the breath, it calms the system down, tells it to relax. Hey, you're safe right now, and the system will calm down. And you can get moments of what it actually feels like when your system's not on high alert, because that's what's
Hmm.
happening to you. If you're feeling that way, your system's on high alert. of a high rise fire and it's going off telling you to get the hell out of the building. The problem is you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to call a fire department. You're just feeling helpless because it just keeps going off and you can't make it shut up.
Mm.
So my advice would be try some breath work, try a handful of different things. Go to Tony Robbins and go to Joe Dispenza and get some different books. The Power of Now is an amazing book for people trying to look at the world from a different way. And just try something new. Try to get new information. Try to see the world in a different perspective because you're not broken. You're carrying around a lot of programs of negative things that happened in the present moment, and the accumulation of all of that is still happening right now. That's why it feels so terrible.
Mm. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Mike. It's been a pleasure as always.
Absolutely. Yeah, I enjoy talking to you every time.